Did you know that Saturn screams? Not metaphorically. NASA recorded Saturn's actual radio emissions and converted them into sound. That is a planet howling into the void, and it has been doing it for 4.5 billion years. For centuries, we looked at Saturn and saw a jewel, a golden sphere wrapped in a crown of light, floating silently in the dark. We painted it. We named it after a god. We called it the most beautiful object in the solar system. We were right about the beauty. We were catastrophically wrong about everything else. Saturn is not peaceful. Saturn is a machine of destruction. It is a ball of hydrogen and helium 9 times wider than Earth, spinning so fast that it physically crushes itself. One day on Saturn lasts only 10 hours. Because of that violent spin, the planet bulges at the equator and flattens at the poles. Saturn is not a sphere. It is a compressed top, hurtling through space at 35,000 kilometers per hour. And if you tried to land on it, you would simply start sinking. There is no surface, no ground to stand on. Just gas getting denser and hotter and more crushing until the pressure turns you into nothing. This is the planet we call beautiful. Now let's talk about the rings, because what we call beauty, physics calls something else entirely. From a distance, they look like a single solid disk, smooth, golden, perfect, eternal. But fly toward them and watch the illusion collapse. Saturn's rings are not rings. They are a graveyard in motion. Trillions of fragments, ranging from particles smaller than a grain of sand to boulders the size of a 5-story building, all orbiting at thousands of kilometers per hour. They crash into each other constantly. They shatter. They stick together. They shatter again. There is not a single moment of silence in those rings. What you see from Earth is the most beautiful disaster in the solar system. The ring system stretches nearly 300,000 kilometers from edge to edge. It is almost a distance from Earth to the Moon. But the thickness. In some places, just 10 meters. 10 meters across 300,000 kilometers. If you scaled the rings down to the size of a piece of paper, that paper would be thinner than a human hair, a razor blade of ice and rock, cutting through the darkness. But here's the question that changes everything. Where did all of this material come from? This is a story of murder. Scientists have reconstructed what happened. Billions of years ago, Saturn had a large moon, a real moon, with a core, a crust, its own gravity, its own history. It was possibly as large as Titan, one of the biggest moons in the solar system. That moon drifted too close to Saturn and crossed what scientists call the Roche limit. The Roche limit is the point at which a planet's tidal gravity becomes stronger than the internal forces holding a smaller body together. Cross that line, and there is no return. Saturn began pulling the moon apart from the inside, not with an explosion, slowly, patiently. The gravitational pull on the near side was stronger than on the far side, and that difference started cracking the moon apart. The crust separated from the core. The core fell inward toward the planet, and the crust, billions of tons of ice and rock, spread across the orbital path and became what we see today. Every photograph you have ever seen of Saturn, with its gorgeous rings, you are looking at the remains of a world that no longer exists. A planetary graveyard, lit beautifully by the sun. We have been admiring a crime scene for 400 years, but the rings are not even the strangest thing about Saturn. For that, you need to look at the North Pole. Physics has rules. Atmospheric dynamics follow patterns. Wind creates spirals and circles and chaotic swirls. That is how it works everywhere in the universe. except one place. On Saturn's North Pole, there's a hexagon, a perfect, mathematically precise, six-sided geometric shape 30,000 kilometers wide, 2.5 times larger than the entire Earth. It has been sitting there, rotating calmly, for as long as we have been watching. We saw it first in the 1980s. It was still there when Cassini arrived in 2004. It was still there when Cassini died in 2017. This is not a surface feature. It is a storm. A hurricane with 6 sides, its walls plunging hundreds of kilometers deep into the atmosphere. And at the very center of the hexagon, there is an eye, a vortex 2,000 kilometers across that looks like a rose built from hurricanes. It does not move. It simply watches. We do not fully understand why it is hexagonal. We do not know when it started. We do not know when it will end. It just sits there at the pole of the most studied planet in the outer solar system, defying explanation. But the hexagon never leaves. What does leave, and what makes the entire planet change, comes once every 30 Earth years. Every Saturnian year, a monster wakes up. Scientists call it the Great White Spot. It begins as a bright patch in the atmosphere, and then it grows, until a storm system wraps itself entirely around the planet. Lightning inside this storm is 10,000 times more powerful than anything on Earth. Massive clouds of ammonia ice transform the golden planet into a white ghost. And then, after months, the storm fades. Saturn puts its golden mask back on and waits another 30 years. Saturn has more than 140 moons. Most are nothing but frozen rock, but one of them has been pretending to be Earth. Titan is the only moon in the solar system with a thick atmosphere. If you stood on its surface, you would see clouds, rivers, lakes, and dunes stretching to the horizon. Every instinct in your brain would say, "This looks like home." Your thermometer would say minus 179 degrees Celsius. The rain on Titan is liquid methane. The lakes are filled with ethane. The dunes are electrically charged hydrocarbon particles, essentially plastic. Titan mimics the shape of life, but is built entirely from the ingredients of death. The real shock was waiting further out. Enceladus, a tiny moon, 500 kilometers across. For years, we thought it was just another frozen rock. Then we saw the tiger stripes. 4 long parallel fractures at the South Pole. And from those fractures, geysers of water were erupting hundreds of kilometers into space. Saturn's gravity kneads this moon-like dough, keeping its core warm. Beneath kilometers of frozen shell, there is a global ocean of liquid water. Warm water with salt, with organic molecules, with hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. On Earth, life thrives around those exact vents, with no sunlight, nothing but chemistry and heat. We launched a mission to study gas and ice. We may have found a habitable ocean, but learning these secrets came at a cost. Cassini spent 13 years at Saturn. It flew through Enceladus's geysers, mapped Titan, photographed the hexagon, and transmitted over 600 gigabytes of data back to Earth. In 2017, the fuel ran out, and NASA faced a problem. Cassini was not sterile. If it drifted and crashed into Enceladus, Earth microbes could contaminate the ocean we were searching for life. We could destroy the very neighbors we were trying to find. So a decision was made. On September 15th, 2017, Cassini was aimed directly into Saturn's atmosphere. On its final pass, it kept its antenna pointed at Earth and transmitted data until the last second. Then the heat tore it apart. The machine that had been our eyes at Saturn for 13 years was destroyed to protect something we haven't even found yet. Saturn feels permanent. But permanence is another illusion it sells. The rings are dying. Every second, tons of ring material falls into the atmosphere and burns. In 100 million years, the rings will be completely gone. Whatever exists in this solar system by then will look at Saturn and see just another anonymous yellow sphere in the dark. We happen to live in the exact window of time when the rings still exist. Saturn is a temporary masterpiece built from violence. Rings made from a murdered moon, a storm that physics cannot explain, an ocean that might be full of life, and a grave for the spacecraft that loved it most. Look at it while you can, because one day this will all be gone, and the universe will not remember that it was ever beautiful.